Hi everyone, it's Jerry. From the 2012 Chess Olympiad, there was an instructive game played between England's Nigel Short and Brazil's Alexandr Fier. It's one that really draws attention to several ideas in the game. Ones ranging from holes in chess, support points, discovered check, opposite sides castling. We saw maintaining the tension in the center, pawn breaks, the offering of a queen sacrifice, and also at the very end, a stalemate attempt. So really, a lot of stuff is really packed into just this one game. So let's have a look. Short on the white end, kicking off with e4. Fier opening up with the Sicilian, and now with knight c3. We're heading into a closed Sicilian. d6, f4, and only then knight f3. In the meantime, black does a kingside fianchetto. Bishop b5 check is met with the bishop interposing on d7. So in response to this, we have a5, and now keeping the tension between these bishops is an interesting idea. We don't have just the immediate capture because we're just kind of helping black out. And ideally, this knight is going to look forward to going to c6 and then focus on that d4 square. That is typically the main idea when you go with the kingside fianchetto, d4 square. But by throwing in this a4 advance, black does well to not take this bishop, for one, because it just helps the white rook out. And secondly, well, black now throws a question to this bishop with a6, and in doing so, creates a hole in the black position on b6. So something was accomplished at this point right here. After bishop takes bishop, we have queen takes bishop. With the insertion of a4 and a6, white is the side that really benefited. Again, looking at that b6 square, this is going to be a vulnerable point, and one that white tries to pounce on immediately. Again, keep in mind that it is the queen that decides on taking the bishop because, again, this is what the knight wants to basically do, pivot on c6. So the queen takes, and instead of the routine castle or d6, we have knight d5, centralizing the knight, looking for a fork on b6. The queen is really the only one that could watch over that square, so she does just that by playing to c6. I don't know if maybe going back home is better, still trying to make use of c6 and d4 for the knight. I think if we saw queen d8, we'd still have a5, and the knight is really going to now be the one responsible for watching over b6. A5 at this point is pretty much forcing, I think, something like knight to d7, just to keep that knight out of that b6 square. But that wasn't played. It wasn't queen d8, rather queen c6. And now more development on the white side. d3, knight d7, queen e2. e6 threatens the knight, but not really. We could just play a5 at this point, which is this is now a support point on b6 with this last move a5, clamping down on b6. Pawn takes knight is not there because of a discovered check, and the queen is picked off. So only after black castles does Short react with the knight retreat, but not just to any square. It is the maybe less typical e3 square. And the main idea here is to stay out of the way of this c4 pawn. Soon enough, we'll see that this pawn will look to strike at the black center. So it's keeping that option available by playing to e3 opposed to c3. So here we go, black in the center, striking at e4. It is hit once directly, twice indirectly. Really, that doesn't have to be reacted to, however. So white is maintaining this tension, knowing full well that if there is this exchange, knight g5 is not only going to win that pawn back, but also win the exchange. So we don't have that. Instead, it is knight h6, and only at this point does white now release the tension in the center, seeing how this knight is in a position to watch out for that tactical shot with knight g5. Now we have e5, gaining space in the center, shutting down this bishop in some sense. And, well, I mean, it gives this f5 square up to the black knight, one that black makes use of right away. But that's the little trade-off, some space advantage at the cost of giving up that f5 square to the knight. c4, striking at d5 at a moment where it's a little bit soft and there's not, let's say, a minor piece around for black right now that is there to reinforce this point. So how black responds is not with capture. That would be not so great, because this knight, this is exactly where he would want to be. This is a weak point. This is an isolated pawn, but look at the prospects that this c4 knight has on b6 or d6, both of which are support points for white, and the knight eyes both of them. So that's why we wouldn't have that pawn capture. And another reason is because this c file is now half opened. You really don't want to open up that c file too quickly, or really at all. So after c4, we have the closing in the center with the d4, and not the knight capture. Capturing the knight allows taking towards the center, and then there's play on the g file. So instead, we have knight c2, which is promoting this b4 advance. Castled on opposite sides, we're looking to open files on each side here towards the opposing king. So the lines are drawn. Black has to run with something like this. There's pawn breaks that need to occur for both sides. It's f6 for black, and now b4 for white. Pawn takes, the queen backs up. This pawn is hit 3 times, but it's one that's just ignored by white, and there's this temporary pawn sack. In the meantime, white presses forward even more with b5, looking to peel open the b file, and soon enough we'll see this b6 square made use of by actually a rook. Not too long from now we'll be having rook b1. Before that point, however, knight takes e, b takes a, the b file is now opened, and now we have rook b1 right away. There's no need to go ahead and grab this knight, because we could be having just queen recapture in the offering of a queen exchange. So keep in mind, white is still down a pawn right here, so you really don't want to be welcoming too many exchanges. White having also, another way to look at it, white has the better king position, so keeping the queens on the board is probably a good thing. So after b takes a, rook b1 immediately, and now knight c6, keeping at least one piece around to try and defend that that black king that is certainly lacking some support. Rook b6, hitting that weak point on a6, the king playing here to watch out for that e6 pawn. I guess at this point we could be having queen takes pawn, but I'm not so sure how that all plays out. After, let's say, a queen block, we're either going to have a queen exchange or, eventually another tempo gaining move on the queen. I think white at this point is really just viewing this pawn as not having much value at all. So as appealing as it might be to just grab a pawn with check, I think it just kind of backfires, and white really doesn't get a whole lot out of it. So instead it's rook b6, very, very active. That's ideally, as soon as you get a rook on an open file, that's what the follow-up move should be. How can you get it now working laterally, or in a horizontal or along a rank? And that's exactly how you do it. Pivoting on b6, king to d6, or excuse me, d7 to watch over e6, and now knight g5, hitting everything really. e6, forking possibilities on f7 that is defended with getting the last piece involved for black. And now rook takes a, getting that pawn back. Rook b8, not really needed on this d file, so a quick repositioning for black. Knight e4, observing that c5 pawn. Knight takes a, the queen is now there to defend against it, but still a very, very shaky king position. Knight a3, another repositioning for white, looking at now that b5 square. Knight b3, knight b5, knight takes bishop, hitting the queen. Rook takes, and only now do we have black reacting to the knight's threat with queen e5. After rook check, king to d8, we now have the offering of a queen by white, which is really neat. Knight to g5. If we have queen takes queen here, this is leading to a mate in 2, starting first with knight check and then rook mate on c7. So that is, of course, seen by black, but we don't have queen takes queen. Instead, it's knight h6 watching over that f7 square. Queen takes queen only at this point. After the bishop recaptures, now this rook is needed to do something. It's the only piece that wasn't really contributing from c1. Bishop f4, knight takes pawn check. Material is balanced, but look at the activity for white. The really well-placed knight on b5, extremely active rook on a7, really just both knights in close proximity to the king, and just the displaced nature of all the black pieces. No coordination whatsoever, even though material is balanced. Very difficult to follow through with any good plan here for black. So king c8, rook to e4 is played so that the rook really just doesn't get shut out of the game. The threat here is just to give a check, and then the rook is kind of stuck. So let's play to e4 first. Now the check, the king scoots over, not really wanting to go to the corner. You're just setting yourself up for back rank mates. Rook b6, hitting the knight. There wasn't really a way to defend against knight takes c, so we just have rook to b6, hitting that knight a second time. Knight takes c, the rooks come off, and now the king sidesteps any knight check on d6. Rook takes a, white is really just in the mopping up phase of the game, and it's interesting to see really just this the final phase, because in my opinion there's a pretty decent amount of calculation that went in on black side, and I think that we saw just a little bit deeper calculation on white side in this final stage of the game. After knight g4 and h3, we saw knight to h2, which is pretty interesting to do a knight move like that. Okay, it's giving check, and it's really setting black, it's almost like black is setting themselves up to just have this knight trapped. And the idea here is that after king e2, the knight and bishop are forming a little bit of a wall, and now we have the potential for black to kind of bail out with something like, let's say, rook a6, and start to give some annoying checks, maybe pick off this g pawn. And I don't know, it's got to be a little bit scary for the king to sidestep all of this stuff. I think this was the main idea by having the knight on h2 to really form that wall from f1 to f3. Also, the other idea is to just get this pawn involved in some way to break up the position. That doesn't work out, however. After g5, we have g4, and this is what I'm getting at with regard to black seeing a significant amount of moves deep, and white just seeing almost like one more move deeper. After g4, we do have rook a6, and I believe that both sides did see the follow-up, rook a7. White is trying to just stop this rook from getting any active play on the second or the first or second ranks. And now after rook h6, this pawn is weak. So how do you defend it? Well, the thing is, you don't defend it. You don't even have to guard it, because things are going to work out just fine. After knight b to d6, the threat here is to actually get this pawn rolling. As soon as it gets to c6, there's a mate threat on d7 with rook playing there. So black instead, I think, now shifts gears, recognizing that it's just not going to work out with rook takes h. Rook e6 was tried, and that really does not lead to anything. But just to highlight what would occur after something like rook takes h, we would have c5, and after knight takes g, we would have c6. Again, two threats really. Mate threat on d7, the most important one to, of course, watch over, but also just the check with queen to follow on c8. So what else do you do here after rook check? The last detail here is to know in which direction to go with the king. Going to d1 does not do the trick, because we have this rook check and the pawn is going to be picked off. So going in this direction, in other words, is not good. Going in this direction actually leads to a mate in 2. Black wins after knight e5, king g3, bishop f4, game over. So you can't go in this direction, you can't go in this direction. The only other one, and best one, is to go to f1. And after rook h1, king g2, after rook g1, we would have king h3. There's not a successful check. The knight watches over f2. And if rook h2, well, after king g3, now this bishop f4 move check could just be met with king takes knight. however you slice it. After this, if this came about and we did have a rook check, king f1 to g2 is going to be saving white. So as it stood in this game, instead of rook takes h, we did have rook to that e6 square, still pressing forward in the center. Bishop f4, the last try really. Black doesn't have anything because this knight is just boxed out by the king, and if there's too many trades, the king is just going to sneak over a few times and he's going to be dead. So that's exactly what we have, king f2. And then the last try, bishop takes knight, pawn takes, knight takes g, h takes g, and again the last try here after rook takes pawn. We do not take the rook right away because we would have, again, that idea of stalemate. Well, the position would just be stalemate. Of course, short is going to see that, and he does. Rook a8, and now it's black that resigns the game after a king move. Only then do we grab that rook. So an interesting game played between Short and Fier, and I hope you got something out of it. As always, take care. Bye.